With me is the Foreign Minister of Mauritius, a country with which India has a strong relationship. So, welcome to WION. My first question to you is how do you see the relationship between the two countries, between India and Mauritius?
Thank you. I must tell you that the historic ties that bind us are based on bonds of friendship and mutual respect. We have, in fact, privileged relationship with India, brotherly ties, and this is manifested at different levels. For example, we are celebrating the 75 years of diplomatic relations with India. India has been supporting us since our independence and even before, and India has been present in terms of help and support on different levels: education, capacity building, climate change, housing, just name it. And recently the flagship project of the light rail has been a project which has been so popular that it has transformed, in fact, the urban areas of Mauritius and has been a catalyst for growth and economic development. This is why Mauritius is so grateful to India, to the Republic of India, and also to Prime Minister Modi, who has definitely accelerated the pace of support and help to our country.
So, India is the chair of the G20 grouping, and India has invited your country to participate in the group's proceedings. How do you see you being invited at the G20 proceedings here in India?
This is another proof, this is another testimony of the special relationship that exists between our two countries. On this score also, we are very grateful to the Indian Prime Minister for having made this gesture to us by inviting us as a small island developing state at the head table. So it has been a unique opportunity for us to be here. That's why, as Foreign Minister, I have representing Mauritius, I have participated in the works, in the deliberations yesterday. I intervened twice, in fact, and it was an opportunity for us to make the voice of a small island developing state heard, and for us to flag the different issues with regard to economic development, climate change, the threats that all the countries of the world have to face today. And I must tell you that it was a very successful G20 meeting, and we are happy that we have been invited to this meeting.
Sir, when it comes to India being the voice of the Global South, what can you say? India hosted the Voice of the Global South Summit in the month of January. So, what's your view about India taking that mantle or leadership?
Be it the presidency of the G20, the chairmanship of the G20, and be it in terms of leadership of the countries in the South, I think India is, due to the respect that it commands and the unanimity that it attracts, I think it's been a very positive event. It's a good thing that India has taken over is taking over the leadership. And with regard to the G20, I must tell you that it is an organization which usually works on the basis of consensus. But now, with India as the chair, I think the G20 will be strengthened, because it will mean more consensus, more unanimity. I think the G20 countries will continue to see on the issues that unite them in spite of the issues that divide them. Of course, there is division, and there will be division, sometimes divergence, I mean, on some issues. But what is more important is the issues on which the G20 countries agree, and which will enable them to forge ahead.
Sir, Russia-Ukraine conflict, how has it impacted your country? We saw the shadow of the conflict at the G20 foreign ministers and the finance ministers meet as well.
It is inevitable that most countries of the world, not to say all countries of the world, have been impacted upon by this conflict in Europe. And a small country like Mauritius has not been spared. As you know, we are a small island lost in the Indian Ocean. We are far from Europe, from Asia, and with the rising cost in freight, with the soaring prices of the petroleum products, we import 75% of our food requirements, and inevitably this has had a very adverse effect on the cost of living on Mauritius. In spite of the fact that I must tell you that our Prime Minister, under his leadership, a lot of subsidy has been offered to the population, subsidy on basic commodities, subsidy on cooking gas, subsidy on transport, because we have a very strong welfare state. Education is free in Mauritius, health services are free, transport is free to students and old age people. All Mauritians are eligible to an old age pension at the age of 60. But in spite of that, because of all the adverse impact of the war, of the conflict, and also we were going through a post-recovery era. As you know, hardly had we gone out of the post-COVID pandemic that we suffered the full blast of the war in Europe. So in spite of all the subsidies given by the population, we must recognize that the cost of living has gone up, and to the detriment of the population. So unfortunately the war is still on, and what we wish is that the different leaders concerned go back to the table, we find a diplomatic way to resolve that urgent conflict.
And how do you see India's role when it comes to resolving the conflict? At the foreign ministers meeting, that issue was dominating so much so that there was a divide. But the Indian Prime Minister has several times said that the era of war is not there. So how do you see India's role essentially, as you pointed out, given the fact that it's impacting everyone, including majorly the global south?
I think there couldn't have been more appropriate time for India to take over the leadership of the G20, because inspired by the Gandhian philosophy, and I think India commands much respect vis-à-vis developing countries, the countries of the South, and even vis-à-vis the Western Bloc. So India is in fact the ideal chair of the G20, and yesterday, as you know, Mr. Blinken was here, the foreign minister of Russia was here. Unfortunately, there couldn't be any unanimity, consensus on this question of the conflict in Ukraine. As you know, there were references which were made to the war, to the conflict in the document. Of course, there was no agreement, save for this issue. There was an agreement on all the other issues, as you know. For example, on climate change, on the development cooperation, on cyber criminality, on food security, energy security. G20 agreed on all the document on all the issues, on all these issues. But unfortunately, I don't think anybody expected an agreement, unanimity on the issues with regard to the conflict in Ukraine. But let us hope, as I just told you, that with the help of India, with the good offices of India, we will see the light in the future with regard to that conflict, because there is an urgency. The world is being impacted by this conflict. The poor countries are becoming poorer. If this war continues, as you know, millions and millions of people in Africa will be retrenching into poverty. The threats of famine are here in the poor countries. So we are living, in fact, difficult times. And the wish of everybody is that India uses all the diplomacy that it can muster in order to help to find a peaceful solution to this country.
So my last question is on the Chagos Island issue. What's your view? How do you see India's role when it comes to this issue, which is very close to your governments and your people's heart?
Yeah, of course, we have to be grateful to India for having supported us all throughout on this issue. And we are grateful also to the majority of countries in the world voted for us, albeit in the resolution before the United Nations. As you know, it was a massive victory for Mauritius. The United Nations General Assembly, and also the case before the International Court of Justice. The ruling also was in our favor. Now the time is for us to recuperate the islands from the British administration. Here again, it is only diplomacy that can work. As you know, negotiations are taking place between the two parties now. The UK government has agreed to start negotiations, and let us hope that we will have a successful conclusion. And on that score also, we are relying on friendly countries to help us to retrieve our islands, because the ICJ has clearly decreed that Mauritius has sovereignty over the Chagos archipelago. Now it's a question of Mauritius recuperating that part of its territory which was separated, which was excised from the Mauritian territory more than 50 years ago.
So on a very lighter note, Holi is coming. The connect between the two countries is very strong. Indian festival, Hindu festivals are celebrated there as well. So what's the plan like? Holi hai?
But you know, all Hindu festivals are celebrated in Mauritius. The Diwali, Holi, and also religious festivals like Mahashivratri, the Durga Puja, and just name it. And but as you know, Mauritius is a multi-ethnic country also. We live in peace, in harmony. The other festivals of the other communities also are celebrated sometimes on a national level, and it's a public holiday, for example, for Christmas, for Easter. We are a shining example of national unity in spite of the fact that we are a diverse population. In fact, unity in diversity is our motto. Now, to come back to the Holi festival, of course, tomorrow, everywhere in Mauritius, you will see the different colors, and people will enjoy and will celebrate it as they usually do every year. Probably during the COVID years, it was not the same, but now that the COVID is over, is behind us, all the festivals are being celebrated in a very dignified and very flamboyant manner. And for example, Mahashivratri, which was celebrated a few weeks ago, saw the convergence of about 100,000 Mauritians going to the sacred lake, going to our Ganga Talao. So it will be the same case for the Holi festival. Thousands and thousands of people will be in the streets and enjoying themselves.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for speaking to WION. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
With video journalist Sidhant Sibal for WION in New Delhi.